in the era when most of Africa was unknown to Europeans. Portuguese explorers, feeling their way along the coast, were the first to reach the Cape of Good Hope. Then the Portuguese navigator, Vasco da Gama, sailed around the Cape and found the sea route to the Indies. For centuries, the Cape was the stopping place for ships of all European nations engaged in the rich Indies trade.
2,000 years ago, the southern part of the African continent was inhabited by hunter-gatherer peoples, the Khoi and the Bushmen. Slowly moving down from further north in Africa into these parts were several groups of farmers called the Bantu. In 1652, Jan van Riebeeck arrived. Africa south of the equator changed forever. Van Riebeeck established a refreshment station on the ideal halfway mark between Europe and the rich eastern trade routes. The halfway station soon became a colony, and French and German settlers joined the Dutch at the Cape.
Centuries ago, from war-torn Europe and bitter religious strife, they came from various cultures, languages, and persuasions to the southern tip of Africa, not to colonize or to exchange their merchandise in the first or the final place, but to become what is known as free burghers.
The British, however, cottoned on to the Cape's strategic importance, and for many years the Cape Colony was tossed between the two colonial powers. With the arrivals of the 1820 British settlers, the track Boers soon felt that once again their freedom was compromised by the colonial government. When the government freed the slaves in 1834, it was the last straw. The Freeburgers' disenchantment with the colonial powers caused them to trek further east, where they first encountered and later clashed with the Xhosa people. Piet Retief and others loaded their wagons and started the great trek north. They repeatedly clashed with the African tribes they met along their way.
Do you know Piet Retief? The big leader of the white men, the Afrikaners, long ago. He visited Dingane, the great king of the Zulus. When Piet Retief came to Dingane, Dingane was sitting in his kraal with all his men, and he thought, hey, these white people with their guns, they are wizards, they are dangerous, but he welcomed them with a big smile. He said, hello. Just leave your guns outside. Come inside, eat meat and drink beer. It's what happened to Piet Retief when he got inside. Dingane and his men were singing and dancing inside the kraal. While Dingane's men were singing and dancing, they were waiting for a signal from their king. Dingane just stood up. He spit on the ground. And then he hit his special. And then he shouted, "Bulala Mataka! Kill the wizards! Kill the wizards! Kill the wizards! Piet Retief and his men!"
They repeatedly clashed with the African tribes they met along their way. Die Zuid-Afrikaanse Republiek and the Republiek van de Oranje Vrystaat were established in the mid-1800s.
Both republics shared a sloping and often mountainous plateau that ran from the Drakensberg and the great eastern escarpment of the Transvaal to the wide and empty expanses of the Western Cape. Both republics were agriculturally poor and hence sparsely populated. But these problems were exacerbated in the Transvaal by its isolation. and by its proximity to the warlike and hostile African nations of the interior. Yet by 1877, relations between these nations and the Transvaal had become so fraught that the British High Commissioner in Cape Town, Sir Bartle Frere, was compelled to intervene by annexing the Transvaal. The peace lasted only until December 1880, when Paul Kruger led a rebellion of Transvaal Boers, inflicting defeats on the British at the battles of Laing's Nek, Mount Prospect, and Majuba Hill.
In the late 1800s, diamonds were discovered in Kimberley and gold on the Witwatersrand.
Throughout the world are many regions rich in minerals, where hundreds of mines have been sunk and whole communities devoted to mining have grown up. Of the 5 continents, Africa is well endowed with mineral ores, having rich areas of copper, coal, diamonds, and most precious metal of them all, gold. The largest and most profitable deposits of gold are found in the Transvaal, which lies between the natural boundaries of the Vaal and Limpopo rivers. It's a country of rolling uplands crowned by a long ridge of high ground. But in 1886, inhabited only by a few Boer farmers who had named it Witwatersrand, the ridge of white waters, because of the streams which flowed down its slopes, or more shortly, they called it the Rand. To understand the structure of the Rand, imagine a huge oval bowl with the gold-bearing rocks thinly spread on its surface. Now imagine that that bowl has been tilted and buried beneath other layers of rock by movements of the Earth's crust, leaving only part of the rim above the surface. In this part of the rim, the outcrops of gold-bearing rock occurred. Beneath the surface, we find among the various layers of rock thin veins of quartz pebbles, bound together by a sort of natural cement which contains both iron and gold. For thousands of years, the gold lay undisturbed, some of it exposed, until in 1886, a wandering prospector almost stumbled on the outcrops. His first crude tests showed the richness of the ore, and so the world learned that there was gold on the Rand. A monument now records the event which brought about the Rand gold rush and began the growth of one of the world's greatest mining centers. Among the early arrivals were photographers, thanks to whom pictures of the birth and growth of this mining town are available. An untidy, windswept collection of wooden huts and corrugated iron shacks, which rapidly grew to a thriving colony of wooden houses. And then to a town of solid stone buildings. Abundant cheap labor was needed as the claims multiplied and the shaft sank deeper. This was supplied by the African peoples who became tough, hardy miners. The railways were undeveloped, and wagons had to be used to drag mining gear, tools, and all equipment through hundreds of miles of wild country. But other early photographs show that the journeys were made successfully, and the equipment and machines put to work by the stubborn pioneers. As the full extent of the gold veins or reefs began to be realized, the Rand prospered. This rich new community was still almost cut off from the outside world. But soon, the Rand and the new town, now called Johannesburg, became the center of a vast network of railways, carrying coal, equipment, food and clothing into the new town and carrying off the gold to the ports. In the early years of the 20th century, Johannesburg grew rapidly. Here and there, fast disappearing remnants of that first Johannesburg still survive. Surrounded by a city where almost everything is new and up to date, a sure sign of prosperity. Johannesburg street names recall some of the men who administered the mines and planned the town, including Johannes Rissik himself, after whom the city was named. The town and the mines grew side by side, and characteristic of the skyline of a mining town are the huge dumps of waste material from the mines. So near the city, they're a constant reminder that these prosperous centers would not exist without the mines. From the mines of Johannesburg comes 1/3 of the world's supply of gold. The work is done by African miners under European supervision. As in most forms of mining, the rock is first drilled to take the explosive charge. The charge is pushed home and the fuse lit. For every ounce of gold won from the reef, 3 tons of rock have to be blasted and loaded. And then transported to the surface. The refining process is lengthy and elaborate. At the Rand refinery, these baser metals are removed. During the process, great heat is used to make the gold melt. Handling white-hot ladles of molten gold calls for strong, capable arms, and there's no room for careless work. After purification, the molten metal is poured into molds where it will be left to cool and solidify. The heavy, solid bars of gold are known as bullion bars. Each bar weighs 400 ounces and is worth about 3,500 pounds. A consignment of gold is ready to be dispatched to the world's markets. As the vast industry grows, more and more mines are opened up around the center. And today, after over 60 years of mining, more than 70 mines are scattered across 120 miles of the Rand. To the south, the Vaal River supplies the Rand with water, of which the mines alone need millions of gallons daily. At Vereeniging, a barrage has been constructed across the Vaal. In the development of a city, a good water supply is of first importance. Here also is one of the electricity generating stations, supplying power to the mines and to the city of over 500,000 people, many of whom live on the sharp ridge to the north of the town. The houses are constructed of brick or local stone. The streets are laid out with trees not naturally abundant on the high veldt, which provide welcome shade. The only really unpleasant feature of Johannesburg's climate is the occasional dust storms whipped up from the mine dumps. The African miners, without whom the mines could not function, are housed in compounds. The life they live here is a communal life, not unlike that of the villages they have left behind. One of their most popular pastimes is to perform the traditional dances of their tribes. In the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, where shares in gold mining companies are bought and sold, the London Stock Exchange prices are often determined. Watching over the interests of the mining industry is the Transvaal Chamber of Mines. The history of Johannesburg is the history of the rand mining industry. With the expansion of the mines, the town became a city, a mining metropolis. To South Africa and the world, Johannesburg is the city of gold, built by the wealth of the mines beneath it.
These mounds are the tailings from the gold mine. They are the earth that is left after the gold has been removed.
Britain wanted the riches now in the hands of the Boer republics. It was time to hoist the Union Jack over the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. The Boers disagreed. On 11 October 1899, the South African Republic and the Orange Free State were at war with the British Empire. The Boers were devastated, in spite of a legendary and heroic effort. They suffered their greatest losses in British concentration camps, where 27,000 Afrikaner women and children died. Peace was signed in Vereniging on 31 May 1902. The Act of Union in 1910 brought the two Boer republics and the Cape and Natal colonies together under one flag.
This union entrenched European domination and effectively excluded the indigenous people from the political, economic, and military dispensation established under the Union of South Africa Act of 1910.
The native question was dealt with in the Union's first parliament. One of its first steps was to deprive Africans of most of their land with the Land Act of 1913. The years after Union saw both the formation of the Afrikaner Broederbond, initially a self-advancement organization. It also saw the formation of the first non-tribal national African political movement, the African National Congress. The two nationalisms started to square up to each other.
Having been overcome by the colonialists because of their superior weapons, mobility, and firepower, the African people correctly decided to resist the unholy alliance by setting up political organizations, drawing up petitions, organizing protest marches, as well as involving students and workers in strike action.
Their tactics were essentially peaceful. Two delegations led by Saul Plaatje to Britain to appeal to the British Crown achieved nothing to turn the tide of events. In 1948, the National Party won the election, and for the first time the cabinet under the leadership of D.F. Malan was constituted entirely of Afrikaners. As the Western world recovered from World War II and the shock of Nazism, they also recovered from the racist philosophies so popular during the 20s and the 30s. Not the Afrikaners.
There was a time when the whole developed world was guilty of the very same things of which the policy of apartheid was guilty.
It remains, however, a sad fact that we have to admit that the historic struggle of the Afrikaner for freedom and self-realization did not bring about the sensitivity that was needed in order to understand the same motivations and concerns when they came from black people. Perhaps the worst of our past was that we never knew each other.
But we have an adventure that is more interesting than gold. I want you to meet my friend, Lou Ann Parsons, a missionary from North America.
Hello.
Mrs. Parsons, how do you happen to be a missionary 10,000 miles from home?
Well, Skipper, I could show you better than I could tell you. I'd like you to meet a young African friend of mine named Loretta. She's 11 years old.
5:30 in the morning. Loretta is already up working. She's making mealie meal porridge.
What's mealie meal?
It's like cornmeal mush. It's the usual breakfast in a Bantu home. Mealie meal porridge and tea. Most African children work very hard, especially girls.
Don't the boys work?
Yes, but not as hard as the girls, because parents believe that girls aren't as important, and so they do some of the hard work in the home, which isn't so important. Loretta's father will eat alone. That's the custom. She and her mother and the smaller children will eat their breakfast after the father's gone to work.
We thank thee, O Lord, for this meal. Amen.
Loretta, her father and mother and their neighbors belong to the Bantu people. Loretta lives in a suburb of Johannesburg, which is called a location. Only African people live in these locations.
So long, Ma.
So long, Baba.
Loretta's father is a factory worker, and he leaves home every morning at 6 o'clock. And he joins thousands of other workers who all take the commuter trains into the cities. You see, African workers do not have their own homes in the city. If they live in their own homes, they must live in one of the locations, like Orlando, where Loretta lives. It is not yet 8 o'clock, but Loretta's off for school. No school buses here, but she's lucky. Her school is just across the road. You can see it. We don't yet have nearly enough schools for everybody who might attend.
Isn't that a Christian hymn, Mrs. Parsons?
Yes, Skipper. This is a Christian school started by Christian missionaries. It's now a community school under a school board, but they begin each morning with a hymn and a prayer.
How far can Loretta go in school?
Oh, she might go through high school.
Will all these children go to high school?
Oh, no, not 1 in 20 will go through high school. Education is not compulsory for African children.
Which comes first, and then the division.
And hundreds of children come to this center each week. The center is famous for its penny whistle groups. Penny whistles are little tin flutes and are very popular among African boys. Skipper, I always like to visit Loretta's Sunday school because these boys and girls are so interested in learning about Christianity, and they're such a lot of fun.
What's ahead for Loretta, Mrs. Parsons?
Well, Loretta's a bright child. Perhaps she'll be a nurse, or a teacher, or maybe a social worker.
What about all these other children?
Some of them will be professional people, too. Perhaps some will be doctors. But most of them will be laborers in industry or servants in homes. But whatever they are, I believe they need to know about Jesus so that they can live courageously in this big city with all its problems. And that's why I'm here as a missionary, and that's why the others are here.